Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. And in today's process video, I've got a very exciting to me subject to document. This is James on Sunday just past, the 12th of November, doing his very first Makers Market up in Warrington. He organised all of this himself. For those who don't know, he runs JD3DPrint, a brand that we sell at Hey Little Magpie. He's got 3D printers and also a laser machine where he cuts wood veneer. And he had all of his products, well, some of his products, I can't say all of them, up at the Makers Market this Sunday, and we're so incredibly proud of him. He did really well. So I wanted to get this documented and in his album. So first of all, I pulled out 4 inks, Distress Oxide inks, that I thought would go nicely with the colours in the photos. So I've got Scattered Straw at the top, Dried Marigold next, then Salvage Patina, and Candied Apple is the red that I'm just putting on now. I wasn't entirely sure where I was going with this, but I knew I wanted to keep on using the Spectrum Gardenia that's still on my desk from the layout I did on Tuesday. So just using my brayer to add the watered down inks to the page, and the more you use the brayer, the drier it becomes. So if you roll over quite a few times, if you're impatient like me, then it more or less dries instantly. The only problem was then I wanted to add splatters, and of course they don't dry instantly, but just going over each of those ink colours and adding splatters to those strips. I know the photos are going to sit on top of the strips, so I'm really only bothered about putting the splatters to the left and right of the photos at this point. So just mixing that yellow and orange together to add a few more splatters at the top, and that's it done. So while it's drying, I'm going to match the 2 photos. So these are both cut 3x4. I printed them on a 4x6 paper and then cut them in half, and I did have to trim down the left hand photo that always seems to be a little bit bigger than the right hand photo, and I wanted them to be the same size because they're sitting on top of one another. So I did just trim that down ever so slightly. Now you can see I've stuck these 2 onto some paper, a 6x8 paper from the 6x8 pack from Gardenia, and I'm using my handy dandy trimmer to cut in between the photos, and then I'll use scissors to cut the tops and bottoms. And this is a great way if you want to preserve the edges of your paper to use as a mat in the future. I love the edges of this paper, and I wanted a white mat, but not a clean white mat. I didn't want to use my scrap card this time, so I thought the inside of this paper would be perfect. So now they're matted and trimmed out, I'm just scuffing the edges with my Tim Holtz edge distresser, and then I'm going to mat them onto some black paper from the same paper stack. The reverse of one of the papers is more or less black, you can see there. So that works really nicely. They were too big. I don't know why I thought they were going to fit one on top of the other. So just sticking those 2 down, didn't stick that very well. And then trimming them with my scissors. This is me, isn't it? Look, I think I've got 4 trimmers. I've got that little one there that's from Dress My Craft. We sell those at Hey Little Magpie, but they're available everywhere. I've got a larger We Are Memory Keepers one, and then I've got my 2 new Tim Holtz ones. And what do? I reach for my scissors. I think it's all the gear, no idea here. So just trimming those down and then doing exactly the same. I'll distress the edges with my Tim Holtz edge distresser, just checking that I was happy with the way the black and white is on those papers. Some of the paper was very white in places, so I just wanted to check it didn't look too odd when they were stacked on top of each other on the paper. And I've put the 12x12 to one side to dry, and I will have to wait a little bit longer for that to fully dry. So there it is, but not quite dry. So now it's dry, some time has elapsed. I pulled out this 6x8 paper from the pad again, and I really like the strips that were on it. So I thought if I just roughly cut around the edges, I can layer that on top of that mixed media and use it as a big mat behind the photos. And this works really well. If you've watched my scrapping for a while, you know I really enjoy adding strips to a layout and then adding my photos on top of those. And this sort of takes away having to cut loads of different papers because the strips are already there for you. So just cutting around roughly and leaving a bit of a white border works really nicely. And just cutting around those leaves at the top and bottom just to let them shine. So first of all the lilac, and then I'll do the red at the bottom after. And I do end up putting this mat right close to the bottom of the page because I wanted to get that red on top of the red ink that I've smeared across. So just finishing trimming out those leaves, and then you'll see what I mean about adding it as a mat underneath the photo. So here we go. I'll just push it back a bit so you can still see the strips of oxide inks that I've added. and I'm really pleased with how that looks. So I want to add something that I do quite often, some of these film strip frames behind the photos. I tried using one of these big ones, and I'm really struggling with these big ones. I think I've used a couple, but not that many. I much prefer the basic strips that you used to get in the packs, and you still get in the colour swatch packs from 49er Market, but the new collection packs, they seem to be doing these much bigger packs with the double film strips and things, and it's nice to have a change, but I struggle. Like these double ones with the 6 apertures, I really am struggling to use, but I'm sure I'll find a way eventually. So I go back to my original of these solid and outline film strips. I'm using a white film strip in the end with a black solid. They just layer up really nicely like that. And I'm not throwing away any of the inside bits from those double frames because they work really nicely as little add-ons you'll see around the page shortly. So that white one I will cut in half and add half to the top, half to the bottom, and then I'm just looking for another solid piece that I can add to extend that line. And I just butt them up to next to each other, trimming off the excess, and you won't see because it's all tucked behind everything. So there we go, so trimming that one in half so I can use half at the top and half at the bottom as I mentioned. And then I'm going to grab one of those infill pieces that I was talking about before. You'll see in just a second. There. So these work really nicely, just tucked around as little embellishments around the page. So I'm adding one at the top and one at the bottom, and I am going to add one to the right of the top photo as well, just underneath those lilac leaves, just to fill in that space because there's quite a big space of yellow oxide ink at the top there. So I'm just going to glue these down, and then I can glue the rest of it down and then work on embellishing. And I'm not going too embellishment heavy on this. The photos are very busy with all of James's 3D printed products, and I wanted to let those shine. So just making sure that I'm happy with the positioning of that paper before I glue that down, and then I'll just peel it up and add some glue underneath just so that I don't lose the positioning. So I go around the edges and just distress them ever so lightly with my fingernails, just so that they're not a solid line, because I was quite lackadaisical when I was cutting it out. There's quite a big white border there. So now gluing down the photos. I'm not bothering adding any foam or anything. I wanted to keep this a relatively flat page in my album. My albums are bulging, so I'm trying to be a little bit more thoughtful about how much bulk I'm adding to each of them. And then here are those little inside bits from the frames. I love them. I just think they work so nicely as an extra layer. And then I'm going to add another one, as I say, shortly to that lilac part. Just getting these bits stuck down, and you'll see I'm adding the glue just to the bits of frames that are stuck underneath the photos, just so that you don't see the glue through the acetate. So here's that last piece. Just going to tuck it in there. So just add a bit of glue again where it's hidden behind the leaves, and get that situated. And look at what a difference those 3 little bits add. It's lovely. Now this is a tiny piece of paper that I trimmed off the edge of that 6x8 paper pad, and on the reverse it's this lovely pink, and I thought again that would just add a really nice layer to the left hand side of those photos, because you've got a black photo mat that's sitting on a black film strip. So when I saw that I just thought, oh yes, I'll distress the edges of that and just tuck that in there. And it definitely adds something. I'm pleased that I did that. So just trimming off this white bit here. I just felt that it wasn't necessary to keep that there, so just cutting that down, and again just distressing those edges of the leaves. And you can see a bit more of the blue peeking out now as well, which is nice. So now going into the 6x8 rub-ons, and there are these gorgeous stitched rub-ons which I thought would work really nicely as layers across those paper strips. So I'm just going to go through the ones that are the full length. I'm going to cut in half and use half at a time, and then there are some that are already half pieces that I'll just use as halves. So I won't make you watch all of it. I'll just show you a couple more, and then I'll fast forward. But these, adding little finishing touches like this really elevate the layout. They rather than just a piece of paper stuck on some mixed media. It's sort of tying everything together, and I was way too lazy to pull out the real sewing machine, so this is a great way of doing that. So now this word today is from the 12 by 12 phrase rub-ons, and I just thought that would work really nicely as my title. So I'm going to tuck it in on the right hand side there. I'm just going to use my T-square ruler to check that it is straight before rubbing it down. And again, that works beautifully on top of all that mixed media and things. So just making sure that it is straight, and then, as I say, I can rub that down. And this layout's coming together really quickly, and have you noticed I've barely used any ephemera or anything? It's just been rub-ons and those film strip frames, and sometimes that's all you need really, especially if you're adding mixed media. You don't need to go crazy with all the bits and pieces. It's just being mindful of what you're adding and not cluttering it too much. So coming in with my journaling now, and it just reads, your first maker's market up in Warrington, and we could not be more proud. I came with you to set up and check the card machine, etc. was all set up, then left you and Dad to it. The weather was miserable and it was so cold, but you did well and got plenty of compliments. Roll on December, because he's already booked for the Christmas one on the 10th of December, so I should be a nervous wreck again then, waiting for him. So nearly done now. I just wanted to add a bit of doodling. I felt that I needed to bring the black around the page a little bit more, and my journaling really did look quite blocky there next to the title. It also went down a lot further than I'd anticipated, so it went below the T, which I wasn't happy with. So I'm just working at evening that out. So I added the date to the left hand side of the title and took it underneath the T, and now I'm just bringing these squiggly dots above the journaling to soften that hard line of the top of the journaling, and then to the left just to extend that line down. So finally going to cover the photos to protect them, and I'm coming in with my black Distress Oxide spray, just using a paintbrush to add some splatters. And that's the layout done. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's given you some new ideas of using the 6x8 paper pads, because that's what I focused on today with the rub-ons. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do ask if you have any questions at all. Otherwise, I shall see you again very soon. Thanks again. Bye.